couldn't believe that. They're like, the whole point is that judges leave the room.
I needed hope that the future could be different. Okay.
Why are we even doing a podcast together? Like, sometimes I just don't know. I think you should do it this time.
Hello and welcome to Yarn Library Podcast with me, Georgia Denham, at Tulipel on Instagram, and
me, Adam Cleveley.
Cleveley Knits.
I never say at Cleveley Knits. I only just noticed that.
I suppose it's inherent in the name.
It's close enough.
Yeah, it's a bit weird that I kind of go, Georgia Denham at Tulipel. Okay, well, it's a funny position for us right now because we've had errors with the last episode for days and days and days. About 20 minutes before we sat down to record this episode, the podcast for our semi-final reaction released.
Live. It was amazing. So Georgia did a lot of the heavy lifting, a huge amount of heavy lifting last week. Obviously, Georgia does most of the editing, does all the editing. But then it comes to the actual, we've got to get this live. Georgia did a load of trying to get it live and it didn't work. And we had a load of email back and forth. We basically left them to it and we said to Riverside, you guys have got to do this now because we can't do it anymore.
In the past, when we'd had exactly the same error or the same error as it's appeared on our side, they had to resolve it. I think it was episode 5. We had the same problem. We kept getting feedback that, oh, well, it's just that the file that you've uploaded is corrupted. So you just need to check the file again and re-upload it. But the thing is, we'd recorded and edited fully within their closed loop system. The feedback wasn't relevant. It really had me doubting myself at various points. If you keep being told that you must be the issue and that if you follow our troubleshooting or look at this helpful webpage, it's like, yep, none of that is relevant. When it happens so consistently over and over again, it does start to feel, in my role as the editor, that it must be something I was doing. I put a little post on Instagram this week just saying, look, I'm not going to chase them because I'm going away for the weekend to be with my wonderful niece and nephew in Hungary, and I want to have a nice time. And if I'm checking my phone all the time, they're pretty low screen kids as well, so they're not really around phones. We don't really have phones on when we're around them that much, which is lovely. I thought, I'm not chasing them and they can deal with it, because in the past they'd offered to deal with it. So the funny thing is, in all of this, Adam just you just thought, you know what? I'm just going to give it another go.
I tell you what it was. It was, whilst I want to think that it was whimsical and I'll just give it another go, actually what it was is that I fully read their terms and conditions last night and their service level agreement. I went through all of it and I was looking for legal grounds to complain and ask for money back. I thought I need to be absolutely bulletproof here. So because you're the editor and I'm the owner of the account, I wanted to have that experience firsthand. I just went through the steps that you'd gone through already. And then it went to bloody works. Wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to be able to use it as cast iron evidence of them being absolutely rubbish and it not working yet again. But then I could write it in the first hand. So sorry.
So some of you might be listening to that episode and being like, that's a bit confusing. The final was last night, so why is there a new episode out like this? We haven't had a chance to even explain it.
And the exciting thing this week is that we're not even recording on Riverside this time. We're using a new platform. So Georgia was so cross overnight. What Georgia was doing was testing a new platform because she couldn't wait until the next series. It was like, no, enough's enough. I'm jumping ship now.
I think I needed the assurance. I needed hope. So I needed to hope that the future could be different, because even on the weeks where I kind of got Riverside to sort of work, the problem is as soon as we start adding in outros or intros, oh gosh, I did think about the sun moving, but it's really moving.
Right, because last week you did some solo podcasting, so this week I'll do some solo podcasting. I'm waiting for you, Georgia, to notice the new scarf that I'm wearing, but feel free to take your time over that. I have just knitted this.
Okay, you're going to have to send me pics later because you're a bit blurry at the moment.
I don't know when I'm going to release it. I've just finished knitting it, as I say, but I don't know. I might not release it until the yarn retreats as well.
Well, that was very exciting. We had all kinds of excitement in the last 2 days, launching your yarn retreats, which is very fun. Do you want to talk about that at some point?
I guess at some point I should.
The floor is yours, Adam Cleveley, at Cleveley Knits on Instagram.
Thanks, at Tulipel. Sorry, that's Georgia Denham. Oh, what we like. Right. No, I haven't even prepared anything. I have been really frustrated that I never seem to get myself on one of these knitting retreats, and I almost managed it a little while ago. But they book up ages in advance. Also, I've also been invited to be a teacher or personality on other knitting retreats. The most recent request I've had is for September 2027. And I can't book up my life that far in advance. And I guess a lot of people can. And I love for those people that they are that organised. That is what they're able to do. But I just can't commit to stuff like that. So first of all, I wanted to be able to go on them. And secondly, I wanted them not to be 14 years away. So with Louise, who's someone I met through Instagram, she runs Maker on the Move. She's a crochet teacher. And so we thought that would make a nice pairing that the two of us could do these retreats together. She's got loads of experience doing this sort of thing.
I didn't realise it was crochet stuff as well.
Sorry, that's a kind of knitting, Georgia. If we can come on to the Game of Wool, I watched the cast-off programme afterwards. Tom said on that one, you defied... Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. Yeah, we're getting into spoilers now. Tom said to Holger, you defied what could be done with 2 sticks and a ball of yarn. And I thought that was a fitting way for him to conclude the Game of Wool.
There were some moments where Tom was trying to have a moment. Yeah, Holger was saying some really interesting, in-depth stuff about personal expectations from his family, how he'd gone above and beyond to do really amazing things. It was a very nuanced, emotional point, I felt. Holger was kind of saying that he didn't want to disappoint people and that he was a perfectionist, but also a very pessimistic perfectionist. And so he ended up creating these really amazing things and really pushing himself in a way. Whenever I'm talking about what someone's talking about, especially when it's really personal, I want to make sure that I'm either saying exactly what it was that they said or making it very clear that I then start to paraphrase. So apologies as I fumble around this. But the example that he gave is his parents would have loved to have had grandchildren. And so almost in compensation for that he'd gone above and beyond in other ways. And it was a very meaningful, emotional thing.
I was torn apart by that comment. It was heart-wrenching, particularly because in the previous episode, he talked about his father having died recently. It was just so difficult, just to feel, just to absorb that emotion. I just felt for Holger so much because it was something as well that I feel like I understood. I obviously don't understand exactly what he's been through, but that difficulty that you have of not meeting expectations of parents is such a hard thing to manage. And I just felt that as well with the kind of thing that he was talking about. It completely floored me.
Yeah, I think once you transcend into something like having children or fertility, it's something that weighs heavy on me. I don't have children yet. I'd love to have children. And my family thus far have been really good and balanced for the most part about holding a distance with that and knowing it's a personal choice. But, I've said before, I have endometriosis. And whilst generally it only marginally affects your fertility in some ways, in other ways, you do have increased risk factors. It does weigh heavy on me. Then you compare that with someone who, for whatever reason, doesn't have children. It's something that really affects the LGBT community. And in that instance as well, he was saying this to another person, Tom, who has a husband, and they have a child together. And so it was really quite, I don't know, an emotional moment and a transparent moment. Holger was just being honest. He was being transparent and honest. And I don't think he was saying it for any kind of dramatic effect. He was just stating it as it was. And that
I
was
totally
really
agree. I mean, obviously, I guess it's difficult because we don't know whereabouts Holger is on that spectrum. I've got my reasons why what Holger said is a really difficult thing for me to process. And that's very personal to me. You've got reasons for you. Everyone will interpret that differently because we weren't left with a picture of exactly house, what you've got no idea whether it's personal choice, whether it's fertility or whatever. But in a way, none of that matters because the issue is how he feels about it and his perception of himself. And that was just a very personal and powerful moment, I think, that came across. And that's part of what makes him such a joy to watch. He has such a clear cut through with exposing truth. The witty comments that he makes are also brilliant because they are just so clean and transparent. That's what makes him very lovable as a character on the program to watch. But yeah, really big moment for me. And in a way, you were talking about how Tom was relating to that, and I want to come back to you about how you feel about Tom's reaction to that, but also how would you feel if the whole show was full of that? because that's also another thing. Like, could you have coped with that? Early on in the series, I talked about how the fact that I really didn't like that we weren't getting to know the characters, that we didn't get to see that stuff. And then towards the end, as it develops, as we've got more time on the show to be able to do it, we do see more about the characters. Is that something you've enjoyed?
I think it brought out better editing. There was something about the energy of this episode, be it the nice sort of banter between the groups, especially in the group challenge. They couldn't really pit them against each other in the same kind of way that they've kind of tried to do in the past. Yeah. And I mean, what's been really lovely to see on socials actually is, socials, who am I? Social media. Something I've seen a lot on social media is actually the contestants meeting up and talking and doing posts together, sharing stories, pictures of like, oh yeah, we've had a meetup. And there was one funny, I can't remember if it was Lydia that posted it or Simon posted it. I know certainly Simon and Holger, it was on their stories, but also in Lydia's. I forget who did the initial post, but somebody said something about like, apparently we all hate each other. And
I saw that.
I don't know who it was, which person on the internet said, well, clearly they all hate each other.
That was last week or the week before, because Holger and Lydia, there were a couple of moments where it was cut so that it looked like there was this real, almost animosity between the two of them. And they made it clear afterwards, as contestants, that was an editing choice, not how they felt about each other. This is what I was saying in last week's episode, or like the episode that dropped an hour ago, is that the passion that we feel for the contestants is so strong, it's very difficult to watch. So like some of the editing choices are quite difficult. And there's something about that that doesn't quite work as a TV show yet, if they're gonna go on to do another series. Or
A 7-minute tangent later. Be sure to comment if you'd like to see the deleted scenes.
Just before we came on, Georgia texted me to tell me that she'd printed out an agenda to keep us on track.
And right,
after
so what I'm actually
doing
as we speak is ticking off what we have and haven't discussed and what we've missed, okay?
Rubbish.
So that's exactly what I'm doing.
You're too pixelated. I can't see it.
I've got my pen. I've got my pen out and I thought, you know what, we should go back to the agenda and try and get us back on track. Right, so you talked about your shawl. The only thing I really want to cover is that Riverside gave me a migraine.
Yeah.
And I have one about every... So that's the point when you laugh, if you want to laugh. Ha, ha, ha. Yes. So, and the funny thing is that I had the migraine in an airport. Have you ever had a migraine in an airport?
I haven't.
I hadn't, and it was grim. So
not a lot of dark places to hide in an airport.
No, I had my eyes closed, and I was stood at one point going, Dima, I can't see my hand here, so you're just going to have to guide me. And then I did the TikTok thing, apparently, that you're supposed to have like full fat Coke and fries. So I was sat in Stansted, like wolfing down this cola and fries. It actually really helped. So if anyone else has migraines, my knitting friends had told me about it ages ago and said, oh no, it actually genuinely works. It worked. It somehow worked. So that was amazing. Had a lovely weekend in Hungary. And you talked about your shawl last week in our little advert spot. I talked about the chapter shawl and I made good progress. I love it. It's so pretty and fun. I did run out of green yarn when I was in Hungary at some point, so I had to switch to blue halfway through a section.
Fabulous.
I love
that
it.
colour change.
It's really nice. So I'm very into it. The funny thing that is knitting related in that is that night one, I left my knitting on the sofa briefly because we went to have dinner. And then afterwards, the kids jumped on my knitting needles.
They break? Oh no, that's awful.
The next morning, one of my nibblings had their winter Christmas like dance show. So we went to see a kid's Nutcracker, which was just hilarious. Like beautiful, adorable, wonderful. But then you also had like some toddlers walking on stage having no idea that there was a big full production around them and then just like picking their nose in the middle of the stage. Not my nibblings. So that was brilliant. I then had to try and figure out like, is it worth trying to go and find new needles? And all of the knitting shops were closed on Saturday afternoon in Budapest. So I ended up at this random shopping centre in what is their equivalent of like a mini hobbycraft, just like praying and praying. And I managed to find some kind of weird. Are you familiar with the Prim ergonomics range?
Now, when I was in Germany, I went to this yarn festival in Munich, but when I was there,
You didn't, Adam.
didn't
No,
I?
I don't think you did.
I
What was it called,
I
sorry?
must tell you about
Berlin knits?
I must tell you about it sometime. I had quite a good time there. I made an effort. I think it was a bunch of Addy needles that I tried, but I tried a whole load of ergonomic needles, and all of the ones I had tried, I really hated. But I have tried the square ones before, which you've talked about before, which I found surprisingly good.
These would not be my preference, but in a pinch, they were fun to try because the other option was having some, I think, some quite steely pony ones, which I don't like the sound of the metal and texturally, and they're just very firm. Like there's not enough give in them for my hands. So one of the things I've thought about with small circumference things, once cubics stop being square, they only go down to 4 mil in the straight needles or knitting in the round, and then they go smaller for DPNs. I wish that they would continue down to 3 millimeters for the square. I think initially it was because they just thought, oh, it's not really worth it because if you've got hand problems, you won't go smaller than that. But I find the DPNs worthwhile. So I really hate that they don't do the 3 millimeter. But in the past, I've used kind of bendy bamboo needles from like Seen It Do Some, things like that, because I've found that when my needles have a little bit more give and a little bit more bend, then it puts the pressure into the needles and off my wrists for small circumference stuff. So with these ones, they're kind of plasticky, so not great, but they have these like tapered hook tips. So it kind of goes in and out a little bit on the end. I don't know if you can see that.
I can't see
that.
that.
Well, you won't be able
I'm
to see it
afraid,
because
no.
it's... Nah. Okay, so
Also, I'll remind you that we're recording a podcast. A lot of people listen to it.
It's true.
Lovely that you're showing these things to the camera, Georgia.
Well, it's like when it said hook tips, I thought, wait, is it like a crochet thing? But they they taper in and out again on the end ever so slightly, with the idea that you can get your stitches a bit easier.
I know what you mean. It's like when you see like teats on a bottle for a baby, on a baby bottle, that you see that sort of...
Yes,
that,
teats.
Yeah, that's the word you're looking for, Georgia.
Teats, Adam.
That's...
Yes, so I have benippled needles now.
Well, that's where my mind's gone to anyway.
And
because those help the stitches not to fall off. If you're not gripping all the stitches, they're really interesting.
so they tided me over, and I was knitting on them for a couple of days. And I mean, basically, as soon as I got home, I was like, right, where are my other normal needles? And I went back to my wooden ones.
I've not had quite exactly the same thing, but given I have broken needles or lost needles before, I now take at least double the number of needles that I need when I'm traveling. Like if I'm knitting on 4 millimeters, I'll take at least 2 sets so that if 1/4 breaks, I can stick a 3.5 on the other end or whatever, to be able to keep going. I can survive multiple breakages.
Adam, I'm not even joking. This is the first time I haven't done that.
Really? Well, there you go.
So I do that normally every single time. I just had my small backpack for a couple of days, had some extra thermals in there. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to be extra light. I'm going to be a speedy traveler. And I'm just not going to have any extra knitting needles. Who needs extra knitting needles? And then they jumped on my needles. So there we go.
The universe is like
Game of Wool.
I feel like we should talk a little bit about Game of Wool.
We had a little bit of a brief chit chat about it earlier. Oh gosh, and now the sun's moved.
Got sunshine. Hooray. So while Georgia is dealing with her sunshine problem, I guess I will explain what the Game of Wool challenge was for anyone that didn't manage to watch it. The idea was to create a postbox topper. Now, this is something that I know because my DMs went wild at this point, that a postbox topper is not something that is well known outside of the UK. It's a very much UK phenomenon.
That's interesting.
So people outside of the UK had absolutely no idea what this was until obviously later in the show when they actually explained it. But a postbox topper, in the traditional British sense of a postbox, a freestanding postbox, is a vertical red cylinder, but at the top it has this sort of slightly wider brim of a hat, which
a
makes
teat,
it,
if you will.
well, okay, I've not seen every kind of teat, Georgia, but I wouldn't describe it that way.
Like my knitting needles.
It makes it both because there is a relatively flat top and there is a brim around which you can secure something. It makes it an excellent platform to be able to do some yarn bombing. And again, yarn bombing is where you just take something and you cover it in a yarn-based decoration. Sometimes it's done as political statement, sometimes it's done as just pure entertainment. But there are some magnificent examples of yarn bombing.
Unity, yeah.
Yeah, if you have a look on Instagram or wherever for yarn bombing, it's a great thing. In the UK, particularly, there are some people that go and create magnificent toppers for these post boxes. And yeah, as I say, they're either part of celebrations for humour or for political statements. And the task was given to them. All three of them had to work together to create a post box topper, to create a Game of Wool world. And specifically the guidance that was given to them, Di wanted them to create the figures. We talked last week about, we saw some dolls or something. Are they going to have to knit figurines? That's where that came from, that they were actually having to recreate Sheila and Tom. To create instantly recognizable people using techniques that they had used during the Game of Wool challenges. It was a nice one, wasn't it? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I actually thought that I really liked this challenge. And in a way, it's sad that we didn't see it sooner, because if we had more people doing it, it could have been really lovely. And it felt like something that was actually almost realistic. One of the objections to the show has been that the challenges haven't always felt real world or realistic, like not something that you would actually do. And this is a well-established thing.
This came to me just too late, but I just remembered as well that Simon actually, he's done a lovely postbox topper, which he did as a solo thing. Back in May, I remember he did a magnificent postbox topper for, I can't remember exactly which event it was, but it had a Spitfire on top. It's worth going and scrolling back through Simon's feed to go and see it, because it's really beautifully done. But yeah, in the more sort of achievable sense, with the time available as well. So they're given 12 hours for the challenge. We're back up to 12 hours. I loved it, except for the fact that I obviously look at the show based on the fact, like, how would I do on that show? And again, it was bitterly disappointing, because I was like, well, I can't do that because I don't really crochet like that.
There was a funny moment where they were like, all the knitters are heads down in focus. And I thought, yeah, crocheting. Every single one of them is crocheting right now. The knitters are all heads down crocheting.
I wrote that down. I know we shouldn't keep talking about it because it's probably just boring. And I'm bored of being frustrated by it. So I'm sorry. You have to just deal with it.
As the weeks have gone on, it's like we've seen more crochet or more options to crochet in a weird way. And part of me is wondering if when they just started making this program, experience showed them week by week that crochet was going to help make the show format viable.
It was interesting
because it was quicker.
Because I don't know if it was in the main TV show. No, I think it was in the cast-off show. Elsa talked about her first knit. So I don't know if you remember, but she made that beautiful, the tank top, which had a sort of attached, like a scarf thing, necktie around it. But on the back, it had that porthole. And on the porthole, she said that took me a fair bit to practice because I wanted to crochet it, but we weren't allowed to crochet in that task. I mean, I can't believe there was a task where they weren't allowed to crochet, because I think I saw it in almost every other task. But
maybe occupational health came in and was like, you can't let them crochet.
Or, by the way, you can't let them knit for 10 hours or 12 hours straight, whatever. It was interesting. I got a hilarious comment on Instagram as well. Someone said, why is Tom wearing spaghetti bolognese?
That's pretty good. Yeah, so Tom Daly, the host, was wearing this really big, amazing, fabulous coat.
Every outfit he's worn has been very dramatic.
Yeah.
You know, centre stage.
It was actually taken as the inspiration for his little crocheted miniature using the loop stitch. I think that at least that's how Holger did it with his little figurine. So it looked like a big shaggy schnoodle. Elsa did Sheila and did some intarsia of the sort of the tunic that she was wearing. Lydia did Di's little knitting needles in her hair. It was really lovely. We got to see more of the camaraderie that I think has been present all the way through the show, and how they were actually figuring things out together and laughing and joking.
It looked really playful, didn't it? It looked happy and playful, and like, yeah. And the other thing is that on the cast-off program, Tom asks each of the contestants what's the one thing you would tell a new knitter, but the other thing is he asked them, like, what have you learned on the show? And what Holger said was, I learned the loop stitch from Lydia. And that was interesting as well. I wish they would have shown Lydia teaching Holger that stitch. That's exactly what happens in a knitting group, is that you would see, like, how do I do this? And someone leans over and say, let me show you, or, you know, this is tell you, then I'll observe. I'd have loved to have seen that. Again, for the authenticity of it.
That felt more like what knitting is when I'm with my friends. And you've kind of got to think that this dynamic must be existing within the show because of how people have stayed friends. And maybe part of our experience as knitters is knowing that dynamic does come out when you knit together for a time every week. That's how I met you, Adam, to start with. Judging wise, it felt they didn't necessarily honour the blind judging that we've had in past weeks.
Oh my God,
I found it a little
that
bit
was
like...
just like, I couldn't believe that. They're like, the whole point
I
is
know,
the
it did
judges
not-
leave the room. The judges leave the room so that they're not influenced and they don't see it. And then basically the first thing they do is like, who knitted this one? What? What's going on here?
So who made this? Oh, it was you, Holger. Okay. I mean, I can't remember exactly what their reaction was, but there was a warm reaction to knowing that Holger had made it.
Exactly. And that they loved something made by Holger. There was a specialness to that.
I wonder if they just messed it up. Like they just walked into the room and they just forgot. And then they're like, okay, who knit this one?
And then they were looking for problems with it. And the problem that they had for Holger is that they found an end of his that wasn't hidden away.
In the other contestants, Lydia's, it was something in an arm, a stitch or something. It was funny when they did her little side interview. She was like, yeah, so I made one mistake on the armhole. I hope that's not the thing that lets me down.
It was the
I don't know.
equivalent. Again, if you haven't seen it, it's the equivalent. So it's in the armpit of a small mannequin doll. There is about the equivalent of a single yarn over hole, like what they show on TV. And that's the level of criticism. I'm glad to see the judges paying that level of attention to.
Yes.
Like we, you know, I do like that. It's also just brutal. Maybe it's the level of criticism that they put into small mistakes that I keep thinking back to Bake Off. That's basically the only version of this show that I watch. But it's kind of like that level of, we found this small hole under the sleeve, is the equivalent of, you swapped sugar and salt in the recipe. That's the way it comes across. It's like really serious when it's a small error. But that one came across as like,
I don't know about that.
Am I being unfair?
I feel like in the final, I can understand that they're looking for perfection, so they don't want any mistakes. I get that. I feel like when contestants have mixed salt and sugar, it's a lot more of a big deal. Even when you've got something that's really close to perfection on Bake Off, there's usually like okay, if we're really nitpicking, we could have maybe seen this, or maybe the proportion of these flowers could have been a little bit different, or it would have been good to see you using, or I'm not such a fan of flamed meringues or something. But they often talk about these things in a context of preference on Bake Off, where we don't necessarily get that so much. Maybe just because we don't know the judges well enough yet. Preferences.
This is where the show needs to move away from the format of Bake Off. I totally understand why you make it in the first instance based on Bake Off, because you know that Bake Off works as a formula, and therefore why wouldn't you copy that and make it your own version of it? But on the other hand, there are certain things about Bake Off that just don't transfer well to knitting.
Apart from the technical challenge that we never got.
Yeah, the technical challenge we never got.
Hello. A slightly late night dishevelled message from me whilst editing. When Adam and I recorded our conversation about postbox toppers and community knitting, I'd intended to bring something up. Naturally, I forgot. So how convenient. Now it's the perfect thing for our showcase spot. So the thing that I wanted to talk about was a really fun, lovely yarn bombing project here in Cambridge. And the plan is to brighten up the city with glorious mismatched bunting after the Christmas lights go down. If you're in or near Cambridge, then great. But in theory, it could be open to anyone, anywhere willing to post their yarnful contributions at your own expense, of course. It's being organised by our local yarn shop in Cambridge for Cambridge Arts Festival, principally by a really good friend of mine who is just the loveliest, coolest person. You can knit or crochet your triangles and either drop them off to the shop or post them to the shop. There's a free knitting pattern available on their website, which I'll link in the description. And I believe they're working on getting a crochet pattern, but the basic measurements are given in the knitting version. So you might be able to figure it out. Occasionally, we have comments from people who don't necessarily have an in-person yarn community. And I'm really grateful and glad that we get to be a part of your communities if you don't have in-person people that you could do this kind of thing with. So if you're inspired by our discussion on postbox toppers, this could be exactly what you were looking for and a really marvellous way to do something together. Anyway, I'll pass you back over to Yarn Library Podcast. And otherwise, I'm wishing you a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Also, sorry that the episode wasn't out sooner, but Dima and I were hosting Christmas this year, so I've been needing to take editing at a leisurely pace. Anyway.
Can we talk about my favourite challenge of the whole series, please?
Oh, the hat challenge.
The hat challenge. This was my absolute favourite because it is one of the most universal objects that a knitter or a crocheter is going to create is a hat. It's something that we have almost all done. I'm sure there are knitters out there that have never done it. They've only knitted jumpers, blankets and scarves, but definitely, like, it's right up there. Have you never knitted a hat, Georgia? Oh my goodness.
Right. Okay.
Why are we even doing a podcast together? Like, sometimes I just don't know.
I've started several. The closest I got to actually finishing it, I was doing like the increases and decreases, and then I increased way too much. And then it turned into this massive comedy beret, and I hadn't even realised. It was supposed to be just a normal beanie. And I'd done loads of like stripes and colour work on it. I was knitting it in like 4-ply or something because I was making it for someone who lives in Scotland. It's a close family friend. So I wanted to use this local yarn for them, but the only yarn I had for this place was this 4-ply, and it just never really worked. And then other times I've started knitting them and I've just been like, I already own hats and headbands. And when I knit gifts for people, I knit socks. So I have 2 whips that are hats. I've never actually finished one of them.
Wow. Okay. Well, there you go. Put me back in my box immediately.
So yes, why are you doing a podcast with me? I'll just...
We have such a different
I
experience.
am a rare exception. I'm a super rare exception.
No, maybe you're not. Maybe 50% of the knitting population has never knitted a hat. I'm just being educated now. Fair enough. I'm
when we get to the summer, I've knitted a lot of summer tops. More
than me.
So exactly. All right, okay.
I love a hat.
But
okay.
you go.
All right, let me try that again then. I love this challenge because I've knitted loads of hats and I don't care what anyone else thinks. Hats are brilliant.
I accept that it is a staple for the knitter community. I recognise that I am in the anomalous 1-2% of people who aren't really like
I'm going to put a poll on Instagram.
hats.
What, do you think I can do it? Do you mind if I do it whilst we're recording? I'm going to put a poll on Instagram. We'll find out from knitters how many, and then within half an hour, we'll know how many people.
I'm happy. I'm really happy to concede that it is unusual. I just thought I should be 100% honest. I've got to go knit a hat now, haven't I?
Basically, yes. Can't wait to see what people say on Instagram.
Of course.
I'm probably going to get a load of abuse for it.
No, not at all. It is unusual, objectively. I don't think that's
Wherever you've
weird
got to with it, just tie it through the top, steek a hole in it. There you go. You can do some steeking. Steek a hole in it, and it's teapot cozy. There you go.
I think I'm probably closer to having finished a teapot cozy rather than a hat. That's my weird niche. Okay, they were allowed to make a hat, basically of any kind. And the cool, critical thing, yarn choices were free yarn choices.
Yep.
Which meant that Lydia got to hand dye yarn for the challenge.
Yeah,
and she is a yarn dyer.
It's pretty cool.
And I loved that so much. That for me was this kind of lift that I wish we could have seen all the way through. I wish that we could have had these moments of, oh, I know that yarn. I could understand that they want to put people on an even playing field and they'd want to make sure that, not everyone being a contestant would have access to this yarn, but why not give them a budget? Why not give them the freedom to showcase their favorite yarn dyers, or even just have some in the haberdashery? It was so lovely that I was seeing something independently dyed and by the knitter themselves. That was lovely.
Totally agree. This challenge was wonderful for me because they said, like, here is a relatively simple object. It's definitely something which, you know, everyone knows at least how you would make it. It's very approachable at a basic level. And then they were saying, just elevate it in any way that makes it your design, your materials, whatever you want. And each of them went for it, and they were beautiful. You know, you could have judged that blind and you would have known exactly who made each one. It was, their personality shined through. It was magnificent. Absolutely brilliant.
Imagine if we'd had an entire season of like, and this week the solo challenge is mittens. And this week it's a scarf. And this week it's, you know, like a necky chief. Like everyone has to make a necky chief. And then we had hats. But the fact that the solo challenges have just always, it kind of goes back to what we were saying last week about Isaac and having statement jewelry and not necessarily being a challenge that people could connect to. I mean, maybe they just felt like they wanted to show and demonstrate, as in the show, wanted to show and demonstrate that knitting could be so much more than just knitting. And so they wanted to show it in all of these different contexts. But if anything, that kind of gets my back up a bit, because I just think like knitting is enough. Like knitting is enough on its own. It doesn't need to be like bells and whistles. It can be, absolutely can be. But actually, it's kind of testament to the fact that probably the best episode of the entire series for me was the final, where they did postbox toppers and a hat. So it was the right canvas where we could see their creativity and their contribution, and we could see the nature of themselves as knitters coming through.
So there's two things that you said there which I want to pick up on. So one is that I completely agree with the fact that like knitting is enough. I recently had a conversation with someone. I explained all the things that I'm doing, including like professional work as well as everything that I do within this world, and then, you know, the comment came back, but what else are you doing? Like, it's like people don't understand that when you're doing knitting in itself, generally you are doing knitting in a way that it completes something you need. And I completely agree. But also, I will say, I don't think it would have worked if they'd said the challenge every week is, okay, a neckerchief, but make it yours, a scarf, but make it yours, mittens, but make it yours. And because I don't know whether they would have been able to, and all the contestants would have been able to bring something new, and that would have it would have fatigued too quickly, because say you're a lace expert, you know, that was the thing. Lydia did not like being labelled as a lace person. Well, that's how they cut it, at least. But you know, that would get boring if you saw that then every single week.
I kind of agree with you, but I wonder if even just having a few more of those would have been a variety versus like
sofa,
the weird that we got, you know? Yeah, exactly. Like cover a sofa. We could have just had a few more things that felt a little bit more realistic. I mean, they needed to test it out, and they wanted to show that it could be so much more. You know, we had the kids' costumes. That was great. That was a great one. If we do have Game of War moving forward, and I really hope we do, any kind of criticism or any kind of negativity that people sense from us talking about this is wrapped up in like absolute joy and excitement for seeing knitting and knitters on a television screen, and of seeing something that we love so much. We talked about it last week, but I want to see more of this. I think this can be a show that genuinely serves the community and a new audience.
I absolutely agree. I think there's something in it, and I would really love them to be able to, what I would see is turn it around a little bit, to take on the bits that have worked and really lose the bits that I feel haven't worked. But I don't know what the general public is going to think about that, whether people in general think that it hasn't worked or has worked. I guess that shows up in the audience numbers, which we haven't seen, we're not privy to. Do you want an update on the vote as to how many people have knitted hats?
Yeah.
So far, we've got only 80% of knitters have knitted a hat so far of my knitters. So there you go.
So far.
That's I will say that's not statistically significant at this.
Right. So we talked briefly about Lydia. She used her own yarn that she'd dyed. It was gorgeous, kind of reds, pinks, yellows, gorgeous, gorgeous palette. It was more subtle, but that was part of the beauty of it. It wasn't certainly like bright, bold colours so that you had this great big contrast in the design. It was just really beautiful and beautifully made. It was a kind of a beret. She cast on the wrong number of stitches to start with, so her ribbing was off and looser. And so she did end up putting some elastic in pretty seamlessly, but of course the judges did pick up on that, which was sad because they're striving for the perfection. But if you were a sort of a knitter in the real world, that's just what you'd do, and you'd still have a really gorgeous, beautiful hat, you know?
Yeah.
In terms of the design of it, not only did she use her own yarn, which I think there's some family involvement in that. I think is her sister involved in that yarn?
I think so.
Business as well. Yeah. So there's some kind of family element there. But also she used different symbols from her Ghanaian heritage in the design as well that were referring to family. And so it's really stunning and like a beautiful concept. It was very her.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if that was the reason that they actually said that she didn't win. I don't know whether it was that looseness. I mean, that was a cutting remark from Di, wasn't it? That, you know, I wouldn't ever rely on elastic for the tension around the brim. You should have done that with stitches. She rectified it in I guess the only way she could, because she finished with not minutes to spare, but maybe half an hour to spare. Certainly the way they cut it, it looked like she'd done at least an hour or two's work on that ribbing at the point where she was talking about having had too many stitches on the needles. I mean, that's just brutal at that point. How you correct for that?
Yeah, I think it's hard when you get feedback like that. I know this from like composition and from writing music, where it ends up being a time constraint reason that you've had to do something. And then the feedback that you get is something that's like, I know, I couldn't do anything different. I'm trying to make the best of this situation.
Yeah. Do you know what? Visually, the most appealing hat to me that I was most excited by was Elsa's. I couldn't believe that. I adored that because it was not something I'd ever imagine constructing from knitting. And that just filled me with joy because it was so surprising to me. That just sparked this like giddiness in me.
Absolutely, for me.
Because it was just like, okay, a round beret and what Holger did in terms of like a long tube, essentially, perfectly what I'd expect. That's how I would knit a hat.
Beautifully engineered and mathematically considered formula to make that hat, Adam.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that you knew that Di had said that she used the word engineered to describe the hat.
Engineered, yes, she did. I was meaning the comparison with Holger's, but no, she used the word engineered to describe Elsa's hat.
So I wanted to add that little bit of balance. But the other thing that I loved about it was just like the way that the pieces came together and then held the shape of that in such a beautiful way. It was absolutely lovely. It's not something I would ever do because, as we've talked about, I really hate sewing and will do anything not to sew. It's not because I don't think that sewing is valuable. It's just that I don't think I'm any good at it and I don't like it.
With the pieces, so to describe Elsa's hat, it was a dogtooth pattern between sort of a pink and a green, I think. Houndstooth, sorry. And then, what was the name of the type of the hat? What was the name of it?
It was called a Breton style. A vintage Breton
hat. Yes. And she also had this gorgeous moment of lace. Was it lace work where she put something in Morse code that was just GOW for Game of Wool, which was a homage to the history of knitting and women intelligence officers using knitting as a means of communicating coded messages. And so that was really lovely. When Di and Sheila were going around and talking to all the knitters about their projects and how it's all going to go, she was knitting these pieces and then was going to sew and construct them together. And they said, oh, you didn't want to do it seamlessly, the judges asked her. And she said, well, no, because figuring out exactly how to get the construction of those things in a seamless design would have been too much, because the Breton hat, it has some kind of curvature structure to it. And it's not even just about taking an easy option or an easy route. It was the right way to make that hat in a way. But then the judges kind of labored the point about, or at least it was that it feels weird that we have to say all the time that at least the editing labored the point, because I'm always constantly worried that if I say anything that's negative about the judges or the contestants, that it's not going to be fair to them, because I don't trust the editing. It just demonstrates our feelings in general about lots of things with the show. The judges made a point of talking about how the pattern in that houndstooth fabric needed to align perfectly. And I don't know if it was just us reading into that situation or me reading into that situation, but it kind of looked like she hadn't anticipated that that's the thing, the hill that the judges would die on. Like, that was the thing that they were going to emphasize so much, that it was this stitching had to line up perfectly. Otherwise, it in some way had failed or not met their brief. It was almost like you could see it kind of taking over for Elsa, going, okay, I've not necessarily designed it to perfectly align. I've already knitted my pieces. So what do I do now? But I mean, really, like, the hat was stunning. It was beautifully made, beautifully constructed. And there was a small moment at the top of the hat where the stitches did not perfectly align, but because the judges had made this point about, well, it's very important that the fabric completely aligns, I would have gone over the stitches again to make sure that it 100% aligned, but it felt like an unfair added extra, like she got a different heightened criteria of expectation in a way, because she'd chosen to do something that was very unique and complex and really wonderful. I was just kind of a bit frustrated that became the big shortfall when it hadn't even really been on Elsa's radar to start with.
It's interesting. I mean, it comes back to us not really knowing about the judging criteria and the way in which the show and the contestants, all the rest of it, are being assessed, that it's really frustrating not to understand that. I guess there's probably like 5 sides of A4 of rules for each task, which they go through with the contestants beforehand. Let's hope so, that they do actually brief them and that they, that they have all that. I mean, I guess it's one of those things that maybe it comes down to judging preference as well, that you don't know. This is part of us learning what is important to Di and Sheila, and in future series, someone would go back and look at this and say, okay, well, I'm never going to sew up a hat. I'm always going to do it, knit it seamlessly. I mean, for me, it was a feature of the hat that it had 4 panels. That was part of it. That was what the hat was. I guess because they had a vision in their mind, probably their vision was it is a seamless hat. And maybe they hadn't articulated that. I will say that there is a way, because if you know what your 4 panels are, if you can put them all next to each other, then I will say there is probably a chart that exists of those 4 panels stuck together. I mean, she must have done decreases at the edges to create those. So maybe you could have done those decreases within a single panel and then seamed it, or I don't know. The difficult thing for me was I could sit down and copy one of those other hats. I'd know how to do that. I'd know how to do that shape. I'd know how to construct it. Her hat was completely unfamiliar to me. And that's what added so much excitement to me, because I was like, oh my God, I would never try that. I'd never make a hat in that way. That's so interesting.
Like, we really did have 3 very different hats. And in a way, that's what I liked from having such an open-ended brief in the first place. It meant that it wasn't that the knitters had to use a prescribed yarn and a prescribed style or meet some kind of weirdly specific brief. You got to see so much of their personality come through, in the same way that in Bake Off you have the signature challenge, because the signature challenge ends up being something in some way related to that person, that individual, because it's like their granny's recipe, or it's a twist on something that's really familiar from their own culture. Like, we get that insight into who these people are because we have that signature element.
That was one of the lovely things about Isaac and seeing him through the competition, was that he really did bring forwards a load of that into the competition. He brought stuff from his grandmother. He brought stuff from, his experiences, all the rest of it. And he really talked about that. And that made him enjoyable to watch, because he was bringing so much character and personality and history to what he was doing, which is, I guess that's part of what knitting is for me as well, and that's why that's exciting.
And that's so true as well for Lydia. Ailsa, to a certain extent, well, not even to a certain extent, continuously she was bringing forward elements of vintage patterns. And in a way, Holger also, we had these moments, like with the dog costume and the Italian theatre, like 18th century Italian theatre. Maybe it's just the way also that it's edited. There wasn't such a marriage made between the thing that they were knitting in these solo challenges and their individual stories. Do you know what I mean? Like we didn't quite get that marriage in the editing where we felt like we were going on a journey where their personality and their interests were unfolding. When Ailsa is making this glorious hat, I felt like it was pushing the boundaries of expectation from like, oh, I'm going to make a beanie hat. I mean, none of them made a straightforward beanie hat, but she really was not within the boxes. That's not to say that either Holger or Lydia didn't deliver, because they made amazing things. I mean, this then brings us to Holger, who is our winner of the Golden Needles.
So I didn't get to see all of the detail because the only way I could watch it was on my phone. So I couldn't, like, my eyesight's not good enough. But one of my children said, they didn't put much work into the trophy, did they?
No, they didn't. They should have gone to my dad because he does casting for trophies.
Or they could. I don't know. Got one from the Pottery Throwdown. Got someone to make a nice ceramic one.
I know. The fact that it was just like a pair of slightly warm toned to metallic needles pushed through a ball of yarn
on a pillow.
I did like the colour of the yarn, though. To be fair. Anyway, so Holger was our winner, and he made a really charming, gorgeous hat that was like a sleeping cap and had connection to his German heritage, had some Bavarian cabling in a zigzag pattern down the trim. So the hat was, would maybe start out like a typical beanie in a way, and then went round the head down the side. So it had one of those, like a little old-fashioned Ebenezer Scrooge. I'm just trying to come up with a popular image. I'm not saying it's got any relationship to Ebenezer Scrooge other than that, like a old-fashioned sleeper's cap.
Yeah.
With a little tassel on the end. Super gorgy. He was really down to the wire with his timing to get all of the decreases done. There was a lot made of the fact that he'd figured out how to do zigzags and decreases at the same time. I didn't think that was like as much of like a mad thing, but I am married to a mathematician.
I would say if you'd knitted hats, Georgia, if you had the experience that apparently, I keep checking on Instagram, it's round about 80% actually. I'm surprised it's not more. It's only about 80% of knitters have knitted a hat so far. Then I would say that I guess we're going to go into a very niche subset, but when you knit cables in a hat, cables are just magnificent for hiding decreases. And once you've knitted hat patterns, certainly if you've knitted a hat pattern with a cable in it, you'll see that. But I think what they loved about it was the detail at the very top of the cap, because that zigzag, which started out as quite a broad zigzag, as it lost a stitch every so often, the zigzag sort of narrowed and elongated. And then it was a single line of stitches that went into a vertical line as the width of the zigzag decreased and decreased and decreased until it was a straight line. And that top part, I think, was what was particularly so visually appealing. That's where I saw the real beauty of that particular cable. That's where I thought that really came into its own. But yeah, I mean, goodness, he was definitely down to the wire, because you could see the other two had finished and they were looking at him and they were talking to him as he was finishing knitting. And I don't think that was edited to be cut. It wasn't sensationalized. That looked very, very genuine that it was down to the wire. But I think he must have made the tassel earlier on. Maybe he'd had a break or something.
It had the same Fair pattern that he'd had in the first. I mean, Fair
I was going to say,
the
George,
same
what are you
stranded
saying?
colourwork.
Do you mean stranded colourwork?
I was. No, I was looking at a bird's nest outside my window. Actually, I'm so. Got distracted.
Maybe you could
ADHD.
Maybe you could just bar that out.
It had the same stranded colourwork pattern as in his vest from the Fake Isle vests from the first week challenge. Maybe we should say fake Isle.
You know, I've not gone and done the analysis. I don't know. It might be a Fair Isle pattern for all we know. I say for all we know.
I'm pretty sure we're not. It's not.
I can't.
The amount of analysis that went into that, I feel like we would have seen some disclaimers of like, yes, and Holger did use a Fair Isle pattern, but it's not Fair Isle because it was not knitted in this way with these things.
A much bigger issue is you said that's a more classic beanie construction. I don't think it was, because
I just meant in the shape of it.
I would say I think he had a double brim.
Did it have a turn up?
It didn't. It wasn't turned up.
Is that not a typical beanie?
I would say a typical beanie does have a turned up brim, but I think either had a double knitted brim or he knitted it double, one or two ways, and put the picot in the middle of it. I don't know without looking closer, like at the individual object, but that's not a common thing to do. I think they sort of picked up on there being a slight interruption of the line there in the shaping.
I did wonder if that was going to trigger you when I said that, to be honest.
You totally triggered me.
I was like trying to figure out a way to describe like the shape that it just fit around the head and then went down the side. As soon as I said it, I was like, Adam's not going to like that.
Yeah, I mean, just like any top hat.
Wait, what do you mean top hat? Are you confusing me? Are you trying to confuse me here?
Just distract you. In fact, so I will say, actually, this is another segue into my kids recently asked me to teach them to knit, and
I know,
it's
adorable.
very, very wonderful experience. But one of them immediately, what do you want to knit? Let's work at, what can I knit? I want to knit a top hat. That's what he went to. I just want to knit a top hat. It was for a friend of his.
So extra.
It's just like, maybe that would be my just knit a hat. Okay, I'll knit a top hat. See how that goes.
And then you can have this lovely personal story about how you taught your child to knit by teaching them to make a top hat.
And that's what he always wanted to do. I think I'd probably also then knit it out of bin liner to because it's the perfect black yarn. That's my tribute to the great Holger.
So good. So there's a picot edge,
yeah.
Picot cast on.
Well, it may not have been the cast. Actually, that's a good point. It may not have been the cast on edge. I don't know. He had picot detail around the edge.
There's a picot detailing around the edge. The judges didn't like that because they were like, yeah, I feel like it's so close to the stranded colourwork design at the bottom of the hat. The judges didn't really like that. That felt more like a preference thing. And I feel like, if anything, the picot bind-off added a balance where if it had been a straight edge, I think that could have been too abrupt. And it wouldn't almost have smoothed. I don't mean physically smooth, but
it softens
sort of
the edge. It's visually, it softens the edge.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what a picot edge is, it's where you basically have these. You can have like long tassels, essentially, of knitted edging that come away from the edge of your work. You cast on a bunch of extra stitches and then you cast them off immediately. So it sort of creates this frond, or little bit that comes out of the knitting. So in my mind, when I think about picot edging, I think about 3 or 4 stitches that do that, which gives you quite a long detail. So that's what I had in mind. Immediately, as soon as they said that, I had this idea of sort of seaweed dripping down your face. Obviously, that wasn't what he's doing. It was done with, I presume, a single stitch just to give it a little extra bump.
Yeah.
Which was, obviously, it's done beautifully, but it softened, as you say, between what would be your face and the rest of your head and the hat design. But I'm just going to say, Georgia, that's your preference. It's got nothing to do with how good it is. That's your personal preference.
The fact that it was delivered not as a preference, it was delivered as a, yes, I think you've made a mistake with the picot bind-off. The fact that all the hats were so great, when they came to announcing the winner, I was a little bit more like, actually, Ailsa and Lydia could take this. We've had a runaway success with Ailsa's hat. Whilst I think Lydia's hat was great, and I don't really see much issue there, I have to acknowledge that the judges made the point about the elastic, and that was unfortunate. But I really did think that Ailsa had a shot because it was so great. It had me a little bit more on the edge of my seat than I had expected to be.
Yeah.
No, actually, I'd always gone into this expecting that all 3 of them could wow. But then the presence of those three contestants in the final is also indicative of the same thing. Like, they've been standouts from the very, very beginning.
I'd love to go back to which episode it was where we talked about who do you think is going to be in the final, because we definitely talked about those three being in the final.
Yeah.
Although we had a warm feeling about Holger throughout, that he was probably a winner. It was those three. I really, really, really enjoyed that. Like, it was absolutely great. I went back to have a look at Holger's designs on Ravelry, because someone messaged me again and said, I didn't realise that Holger is the designer General Hog Buffer, which is his name on Instagram, and it's the patterns he releases under Ravelry. And I was like, okay, I hadn't actually looked at what published designs he has. And wow. Just go and have a look. If you haven't looked at his designs on Ravelry, they're extraordinary. Now, they're all socks, and I don't knit socks, just like Georgia doesn't knit hats.
I knit socks.
I don't knit socks, but I can absolutely see the beauty in what Holger has designed. They're extraordinary, and some of them have got, like, a couple of the designs got more than 10,000 like of those like things you get on Ravelry. They're big hitters.
Yeah.
They're big hitting designs, but also
So big knitting designs.
the big knitter. They absolutely show what Holger is about in terms of that level of precision. It's just a marvelous. If you want to get some extra Holger knitting, the link's in his bio on Instagram, if that's an easier way for you to find it. But just go and have a look at his Ravelry, because they're just absolutely incredible. Really, really intricate and beautiful designs that are well worth just enjoying looking at.
I really hope that from the show, we just see more of these people. There was a lovely comment that Ilse made briefly about how she hopes that she could be an ambassador for the craft and for the heritage of it. And I absolutely see that happening. I hope that more people connect with Lydia's amazing work and support her yarn business, not just because they like Lydia, but because it's great yarn. And really, really beautiful designs. I hope that she gets to share more of her designs. Holger, as you've said, I know Simon's already got quite a following, and I love his videos. So I hope that we get to know these people in their own right. It's clear that they've all got to know each other, which is really nice. And they all clearly get on. Winner-wise, you sent me a funny screenshot.
Didn't I? That was funny. So obviously I have a quick look as soon as the show's aired, because I watch it live, unlike Georgia, who's watching it on catch up, apparently.
One time. Had a curtain emergency.
I'm looking at, like, how the companies are reacting to it as well. It's interesting to see Rowan Yarns immediately doing a promotion with it. But interestingly, Rowan are super clear, straight up in their post, that designers will profit from the designs that are being published as soon as the show's aired. Yeah. You never know, but I feel like that is a win for the internet and the community against the corporate of, like, the over capitalist way in which that has been constructed. That was brilliant.
Yeah, after Sirdar week, it shifted. I think Sirdar realised that if they released the patterns and took the same line that the other two companies, they'd have the same backlash. So I'm really glad that they U-turned on that. And by the sounds of it, Rowan has also now realised that that's not a way. Maybe just no one was buying the patterns because they were all like, what? Anyway, you were about to carry on. Apologies for my little interjection.
So within 22 minutes after the show had published, I got an email from Wool and the gang saying, "The Game of Wool finale. A huge congratulations to this season's champ, Elsa, who truly earned the crown of Britain's best knitter with her incredible intricate designs and stitch work." What really got my goat about this, okay, is I looked at that email and I thought, like, someone has really screwed up there, and I really feel for that. When you're on the sharp end of that kind of thing, I know the feeling of sending out a mistake like that is brutal. So I replied to them and just said, just to let you know, blah, 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 whatever. And then I got an auto response from Wool and the gang saying, "This inbox is not monitored." And I was like, It's something that really winds me up. They then said, please use our contact form if you want to get in touch, blah, blah, blah. I cannot tell you how cross it makes me when companies don't allow you to reply to them. And there was me trying to do them a service within a few minutes of them making a pretty annoying error. And they're saying, nope, we're not going to listen to you, blah, 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 blah. Contact us. I didn't contact them through their form. I'm sorry, but that's their problem. And lo and behold, it's like 24 hours later and they publish oops, we made a mistake.
It's really bad. I mean, I can understand maybe they had the different template draft emails and then they went in alphabetical order. And then obviously Ailsa was top because A, but I don't know.
Do you think that's what it was?
It was a bit cringy. I wonder if it was that, but it feels a cringy lack of care and certainty that has been radiating from the sort of corporate identities that have been involved in the show, be that Channel 4 or the companies with their yarn placements.
Maybe it's a very fitting end to the show.
It is, isn't it? It's just like,
oops, Elsa, Holger, they're kind of the same person anyway. Let's just gloss over that.
On the subject of mailing lists, though, I've got a really lovely story about replying to mailing lists. My lovely dad, because my parents separated when I was pretty young, Christmases and New Year's and things, they would alternate. Then as an adult, I've kind of loosely kept the same. But the last time I had Christmas with my dad was just before the pandemic, because the next time I was going to be with my dad, it was COVID. I was living in Birmingham and we went into tier 3 or a tier 4 kind of lockdown situation. And there is actually a funny essay that I wrote about my time working in a supermarket at Christmas, which may be a festive fun read. You can Google Georgia Denham turkey dreaming and find it. Alas, that was the last Christmas I was supposed to spend with Dad. The time before that, my dad hadn't actually really left the UK for a long, long time. I mean, barely out of Yorkshire, to be honest. My dad doesn't drive. Yeah, he'd not been on a plane, I think, since I was little. And I took him to Tenerife because I had a friend who lived there. And I booked all the flights, sorted all the plans out, and we went on holiday together. On Christmas Day, he got, oh, it makes me feel almost emotional. He got an email, a Merry Christmas email from a company called Jackson's Art Supplies, who do, paints, canvases, sketchbooks, paper, all that kind of thing. We're in this hot tropical environment. And we sat in our Airbnb. My dad was on his phone. I was like, how are you getting emails on Christmas? He's like, oh, I just got a Merry Christmas from Jackson's and I wanted to thank them. I was like, Dad, it's an auto email. It's their mailing list. You Gen Xers. And he said, there will be a lot of artists on their own at Christmas and that will probably be very meaningful to people. And I'm not on my own. And I wanted to let them know how nice it is to get that email. So when you do actually man your mailing lists and you do build that kind of company rapport with people, you get the opportunity to maybe even have meaningful connection with people. And that email from Jackson's Art Supplies meant a great deal to my dad. And it's stood out to me since as a really lovely thing.
I'm an wholesome supporter of that. And that's partly why I feel so upset about the Wool and the Gang one, which also was a huge spoiler for anyone that wouldn't have watched the episode yet. From my experience, when I ran a health supplements business, that tended to be dealing with an older community because they, you tend to have an older average age of people that are interested in health supplements. So I also wanted to more personally connect with people when it came to Christmas. And so actually I hand signed cards to at least 100 customers a year just because I felt that was a good thing to do. But once we did it once, it became such a meaningful thing. Actually, something really lovely came out of it because then actually people were more interested, not as me as the chief executive of the company, but they got more excited when we tried to scale it up and the cards were hand signed by the customer care team because those were the people that they would have spoken to during the year. And it created this extra level of more communication and more warmth. That kind of customer care, that interaction is something that I care passionately about. And so I get quite offended and quite triggered when people don't do it properly. So sorry. Yeah, Wool and the Gang not only got it wrong, but included spoilers for anyone without any warning.
Oh yeah, that was a spoiler. It is a spoiler thing, isn't it? But it's also the wrong spoiler.
It's the well, except that they then corrected it 12 hours later or whatever, and then just gave the corrected spoiler. But it's also delivered in their very sort of jokey, like lively, like, oops, sorry gang.
Whoopsie.
We made a whoopsie. We were led to believe that, blah, 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 whatever.
So how do you feel overall? We've done it. Game of Wool.
I am very glad that we have got a TV show. I don't know where I'm at, Georgia. I feel so complicated about this. I've got too many thoughts. This podcast isn't enough for me to vent.
Then not even just Game of Wool. How does it feel to be at the end of having done our podcast, doing Your Library, having all these conversations? How does it feel to be a podcaster, Adam?
Well, do you know what? I really there are times that I really haven't wanted to come on and talk about Game of Wool because I've wanted to just talk about the other things that I know you and I have got planned to talk about as subject matter. I am massively enjoying this as a format because I feel like I'm able to communicate more about what I think and feel than I do in my my Instagram platform is one thing, but that is snippets of 30 seconds of me or a minute of me, and you can't really convey thoughts. That a lot of that is just there as pure entertainment, or some of it is informative as well. But I'm really enjoying this as a way to be more open and discussive about how I think and feel about things in the knitting world, and I really, really value that and I enjoy that in a way for me because I've discovered that over the last couple of months. The Game of Wool has served in a way as a frustration in that because I want to get on and talk about the other things that really matter to me that aren't just the TV show. And I really want to talk about those. I want to give them space. I want to give them, I want to give a platform to so many subjects and topics, which I now see that we have the time and the space and the ability to be able to do. And I'm passionate about being able to do that. And so in a way, if we say that this is the end of season 1, I'm hungry to get onto season 2 for us, that we can move on, hopefully with a stable podcasting platform that we can, that makes the two of us happy.
We will be continuing with the podcast. I think if you're happy with that, Adam.
I'm definitely continuing with it.
So we're going to continue. It'll be in the new year. You won't have any episodes from us until it will be some point in January, I'm guessing. In terms of future topics, some people have emailed us. The email address is podcast@yarnlibrary.co.uk. Some people have emailed with requests or suggestions for future episodes and things. And we do definitely welcome that. But also when we started the podcast, we had a whole host of ideas and plans. And a lot of the feedback we've been getting has definitely overlaid with a lot of the ideas that we'd had. So that's kind of confirmation that we're maybe going in the right direction. I imagine we can put out some different Instagram polls and stuff like that. It would be good to get an idea of the kinds of things that you'd like us to discuss. Also, we do get a lot of questions and Q&As and stuff. So maybe somewhere in the mix, we'll put a Q&A out maybe and ask for some questions for us.
I mean, I will say there are people I've talked to about interviewing on this podcast, which I'm really excited to bring into have a conversation about. There are subjects where you and I are not experts, but I want to have the conversation with the experts, and I know that some of them will want to be part of that conversation too. We've probably got at least the next 10 episodes planned of the subjects that we want to talk about. But I guess judging by you and me, Georgia, what's our accuracy with sticking to a plan? How long would you give it? In minutes?
This is the first week that we've had a printed agenda, and I have to say it has been beneficial. Yes, it's been a very long episode, but I feel more in control of where those tangents are.
Lovely. I still don't even know what's on your written and printed agenda, but I'm really pleased for you that you have one.
I'll send it at some point.
Send it posthumously.
It's not relevant anymore. I mean, it did. We'll figure it out. Was there anything else to say?
I don't know. Look at your agenda.
I'm excited as well to bring in a little bit more, broader perspectives on craft, because I'm a knitter and I love knitting, and we've talked mostly about knitting for weeks now on this podcast. But there have been snippets and times, especially when we were doing 2 episodes a week and some of the other tangents that we've had, where we do talk about craft more broadly and art and music and, whatever else. We're talking about craft in a broader cultural and societal sense. And I want to go more down that route, not least because my PhD isn't just on knitting, it's on craft much more broadly, first of all. But I also think audience-wise, there are a lot of people who, be it because of those earlier episodes or because of my videos about craft, people have been interested in hearing things about craft more broadly and not specifically knitting chat. So I'm excited that we'll actually have the opportunity to branch out a bit more, which is quite nice. Obviously, we'll still be knitters at heart.
Instagram is very good at creating niche audiences and, in a way, an echo chamber, obviously, of whatever content you're putting out. It will adopt with the audience that you find and create and nurture. I put so much time and attention into my Instagram audience and understanding who I'm talking to, the reasons for talking to them and so on. And what's also weird for me is that I don't know, we don't get the same level of feedback through the podcast. And so I don't have the same kind of clear image. And you and I do have different audiences because we put different content out. And this podcast is a merger of you and me, and therefore I'm sure has tension between 2 different sets of desires. But I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. But
yeah,
I'm not shying away from it. Also, as I've said previously, I enjoy tension. I think tension creates better discussion. It creates better. It is more interesting, and that's certainly something that both of us have had the feedback of, that the disagreement that we have between the 2 of us it's good to listen to, that people get fed up when we agree.
If anything, we've agreed so much on our feelings about Game of War sometimes that we've been lacking in disagreement for quite a while.
No, we haven't.
I see what you did there. I mean, I feel confident that there is a way that we can balance this, that I can figure out how we get the editing sorted. Hopefully this shift in software, fingers crossed, the episode you're hearing now, it'll be a breeze.
I keep saying to you that we may have to consider getting an editor in to help us.
Yeah.
I wonder, that's something which we will, take a view on in the new year, I'm sure. But if you happen to be listening to this, have experience of editing podcasts and feel passionate about giving Georgia and I a voice, then maybe you should drop us an email and a DM and, in every format, just to make sure we get the message.
Absolutely. And I don't have qualms so much about bringing anyone else onto it. It's honestly been that Riverside has been so janky that it just didn't even seem like a way that we could. Like I couldn't rely on even being able to add in a video clip or a starter or a caption without it crashing. When you don't have something that you could even delegate or share to someone, it's like, how do I even manage this? So with the software we're using now, it has
I will say at this point, my internet connection is just fallen over.
The big podcasts that use it,
George's talking about
it's
that.
kind of testament,
I'm really
hopefully,
hopeful
to
this
it
hasn't just
working.
failed all of a sudden, because
so
I'll be
fingers
very,
crossed,
very
and
sad.
that might open out and give us the opportunity to bring on some extra help and support, which would be really
Don't do
nice.
this.
So yeah, watch this space. Well, Adam, oh God, he's frozen. We're at the 11th hour. No.
Georgia, are you still here?
Are you there? You'll come back again.
Georgia, what the just happened?
Should I stop recording?
Georgia, what the just happened?
You cut out, and then it was still there, but it's still recording. I'm just going to press stop.
So my
I'm gonna
recording,
press stop now.
I haven't touched a thing on my screen, and it has just said it's come up with the initial warnings again and has just started my recording again from 0.
Okay, I'm going to press stop now.
You've been listening to Yarn Library Podcast with Adam Cleveley at Cleveley Knits and me, Georgia Denham at Tulip Hole. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share and subscribe. And if you didn't,